So every once in a while I get this question from people who are interested in making their own stories. They're trying to figure out the right time to actually begin when it comes to producing content. When are you good enough to start? When are you good enough to begin your projects? Because the people who tend to ask me stuff like this, it usually tends to circulate around art skill and art level. Like, when am I good enough? When is my art good enough for me to begin my project and still have that professional outlook across the board? Now, even though this video is going to be based mostly when it comes to art and art skill and level and just the creation of comics and manga and things of that nature, you can really apply the principles to anything. So if you want to become a novelist, like, when are your skills prime or ripe enough for you to actually begin producing content that would gain respect or achieve whatever you want to achieve? And these are questions you need to ask yourself, and I'll kind of formulate, you can say, tips or ideas or steps that I feel you need to go through to get to where you want to be. Now, the steps I've created for you guys are created based off of my experience and, my whole journey creating my content, and I'm going to share that with you for the rest of this video. I'm going to be inking a manga page that I've already penciled, and just to keep that visually pleasing for you guys as I break down the tips and steps and techniques and things that I feel you guys need to go through to get to where you want to be. And along the way, I'll break down why I'm even creating this page to begin with. Hopefully you guys watch to the end, as I have some cool news for you guys as well. So let's get to the steps. I think first things first is you have to be completely honest with yourself about the process and how you're going to have to embrace that process, because creating comics is really hard. But not just that, honesty in your goals, what you want to accomplish, honesty when it comes to getting criticism and things of that nature, and how you accept it and how you can sieve through constructive criticism and people who are just going to troll, because those will always exist. You have to be honest with yourself as to whether this is what you want to do and what you want to get out of it and why. How serious are you? Is this what you want to do? Do you really love this? Because if you're going to hit a bunch of no's along the way with all these questions, then maybe you shouldn't make comics. It's just something to think about. Not that you shouldn't, but it's something to think about. Are you doing this for a hobby or just the money or whatever the case may be? Well, what are your end goals? What's the end game for you? If there is an end game, like, what aspect of it do you love? You have to be really honest with yourself. And that honesty is what you apply to all the steps that follow. Obviously, if you understand what you want to do and why, and you keep that in mind, if it's a hobby for you, then that plays a role in, say, what you want to do with the comic. Is it something you want to show a lot of people? That can dictate how the comic is structured in certain ways. Because sometimes if you're making a comic for yourself, then you are only focused on you. You are the audience for the most part, and if anybody else happens to like it, then great, right? But if you're making a comic for the public and you want the story to be told in such a good way, and you want it to be viewed by many people and reviewed by many people as well, and then you have to hit aspects of the whole process of creating comics, and certain things that you just have to do, or whatever you do, you should be able to justify it to some degree because it's going to be seen by all these people. You have different goals, right? Someone who's making a comic for the public and, let's say, to earn a living, has certain objectives to meet versus somebody who, say, he's just doing it for fun, right? So you need to know why you're even in this game at all. The next step is, like, literally just start. Now, starting doesn't always mean, just start drawing the pages or, jump right into that, like, from the get-go. Certain steps you have to go through first before you actually start creating pages. So by start, I mean start working towards your end goal. Some of these I'm not going to be able to go into great detail as to exactly what I'm talking about, right, with the examples I'm going to give, or the things I feel help in that whole step of actually starting, because I have them as maybe separate videos and I go into more detail on those separate videos, so I recommend you check out my channel completely. But I will talk about certain things that I think constitute the whole idea of just starting. Finding a story you love, or finding a message you want to get across. What's the moral of your story? What's the point of it? Like, at the end of the day, understanding your story to its core. Asking yourself any question you can imagine anybody else would ask you, and making sure you have an answer to that. Making sure you can justify literally 99% of all the decisions that you're going to make. Think about your story a lot. Do a lot of research. Get inspiration from everywhere, whether it be, pieces of art or music or whatever, or history that is similar to what you're creating, or maybe something that's so vastly different that it helps in your goal to maybe have portions that make your story and your work of art very unique and original. Finding inspiration from things that are vastly different help in some cases. Draw from real life, whatever it be your story or the art style, or certain things that you do, your experiences in life. Wherever you can, draw inspiration from there and see how it can apply to your story, right? Even when I'm watching movies that have nothing to do with Apple Black, I'm usually studying it, whether it be the story itself, or say maybe the film direction and how things are directed and camera angles. I usually tie it back to, how can this make me a better creator? So do a lot of studying and research and draw inspiration even from places that you might not think to draw inspiration from. What genre is it? Who are the characters? What makes them tick, tock? Understand them completely. The world that you're building, right? I have videos on world building, and there are other videos on world building that you can check out. I recommend not just getting the idea or understanding from just one point of view, but check out other people, read books, do all you have to do to prepare your stuff. This is like a preparation phase that you're kind of going to go through. The building designs. How do your buildings, this world that you've created, especially if it's not, say, regular modern day, if it's like this fictional world, what makes it stand out from others? Why does it look the way it does? Does it have to do with the geography of the place? All that stuff, right? Figure it out and think about it a lot. Character designs, prop designs, ideas, visually or from a story standpoint, get influences like I just said. The originality of your story, like what are the original aspects of your story? I've talked about this before, about how nothing is 100% original and nothing is 0% original as well. Like everybody gets influence and inspiration from somewhere, and that's just how it goes, right? It's more. It usually comes down to your execution. Is your story about revenge? People escaping from a place, rescuing people? Is it a tournament type world story that you've structured here? You've heard or seen or watched something similar to it before, but it also comes down to execution. How many shonen manga story things have tournament arcs? All those tournament arcs go down very, very differently. So when it comes to every aspect, even like the tiniest things and as well as the biggest things regarding your story, you need to figure out what makes you stand out, what makes you unique. What are the original aspects of your story, or the original aspects of your protagonist or your antagonist? What kind of dynamic do you have? Does the antagonist and the protagonist have? The world, the characters, what crews, and like think about your story completely. And I'm leading to a point because it'll get to a point where you actually have to start writing things down in such a structured way to where you can then get criticism from other people that will then give you the go. But that's a further step and we'll get to it. You kind of want to have everything subject to change to a degree, depending on whether you like it or depending on whether you get a better idea later. And sometimes that happens a lot, especially with me and anything I do. Most times I usually think about it, mull over it for a little bit, and structure it in such a way where it's open to change, so that when the change does come, and it usually does, I have a better idea as you go on. Because as people, you're developing, even not just from an art standpoint, but just as a person and your mind and everything, and you're consuming more information daily, and that makes you better and better and better. So it's normal to have better ideas, but you don't always have a better idea. It's good to get an idea, compare, and if you have someone with some kind of credibility to talk to help justify what decision you end up going with, you should have that, and you should be able to have that discussion as during this whole phase when you're thinking about everything. Keep in mind that there isn't one way to do literally anything. There are people who create their stories knowing exactly how the story ends, and that there are some people who have it open-ended. There are some people, maybe they know how it ends, but they feel like it could actually continue and be its own thing, and then spin-offs and prequels and blah, 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 blah. There are many ways of doing things. You just need to figure out the way that works for you and that's the most appropriate for what you're creating. Now, most of these are conceptual things, but you also want to think about how it's going to be created. Is it going to be a colored comic, black and white comic? If it's going to be inspired by, say, the way shonen mainstream manga is done, and so sometimes you might even need to justify why you're even making that decision as well, and you just need to be able to justify it, and that's it. You're thinking of all the questions you could possibly be asked, and you want to make sure you have a rebuttal, a justification, a purpose for doing whatever you do, right? If there is a method to your madness, or if madness is your method, you need to figure that out. Now, during all this stuff, from like a writing standpoint, so even from an artistic standpoint, you want to make sure that you're practicing, honing your craft, and you're trying to improve every time. So you want to know your approach, from an art standpoint and from a production standpoint. What tools are you going to use to create this? Why? And in some cases, it could just be, that's all I had. That's in some cases that's fine, right? And you'll see in the evolution of some artists, their tools change, and then they can be able to justify things. So again, you don't need to have all the answers, but it's always good to have most of them and be open to evolution. Thinking about it also includes, getting the right tools, the necessary tools, how to use those tools comfortably, if it works for you, if it's suitable for the piece of work. Are you creating your comic or whatever you're creating, digital, traditional? What's the format of the creation? Is it going to be something that's specifically for, say, an iPhone or mobile devices like that? So you just want the person to just be swiping up in that kind of webtoon manhwa style, or do you want it in like a reading orientation that it can be transformed into a book, whether you're creating it digitally or traditionally? You want to figure everything out. You also want to figure out the reading orientation of it, so that kind of has you thinking about, where's this book going to be published? If it's going to be published in Japan, then you want the reading orientation to be right to left. But if it's going to be read in America and published in America, then you want it to be left to right. Right? And then if you want to go against that for whatever other reason, you just need to be able to justify it and understand why the standard is the rule. And if you want to break that rule, at least you knew the rule before you broke it. So there has to be, or at least there's some kind of justification for why you're breaking the rule. There are people who want to publish their book in America, but they still have it structured right to left because, I don't know, they want to pay an homage to Japanese. Why? That's up to them. But if they have some kind of justification, even if it doesn't suit me, I guess that's okay. But let's say I'm their publisher and they're going right to left when I publish everything I do left to right, then I'm just not going to take their work. So if you are that creator, you need to keep that in mind, that there's some publishers that just won't take you. So you need to be honest with yourself and know all the decisions you're making and know all the repercussions to making them. Develop your art style. Again, when it comes to learning stuff, or learning writing tips and techniques, there are a lot of online resources that can help you in writing and help you with art. And my channel is one of them, and there are millions others. Maybe not millions, but there are a lot other places that you can go to. So you want to do a lot of research. So this is that phase where you're just thinking. And all of this stuff still constitutes just starting. It still constitutes you beginning and moving towards your goal. The beginning is, being honest with yourself, knowing what your goal is, why, and all that stuff. And then just start is you kind of going towards that direction. So all the stuff I've said is really just start. And then the next step would be, once you've created enough or you've thought enough to where you can have very long conversations about what you've thought about, the next step would be what I like to call like a pitch build, right? And in some cases, you can think of it like an elevator pitch where you're able to test it out with people. And let's say you said, before I even gave you any details about Naruto, what it's about, or anything like that, and I just said, it's Harry Potter but ninjas. That's pretty close to what Naruto is. Then if the person you were talking to is interested in hearing more, then you go to the next step where you then go into more details, but you have it in just one paragraph. So I recommend that you guys actually, this is the part where you've jotted down all your thoughts, right? Your sketchbook, you're during that whole phase of just start, you're thinking all the things you've thought about, all the ideas, designs, everything. You've put it down in writing or illustrations, right? But now we're thinking about in a more of a formal sense to a degree. And you want your pitch. And then if they're interested in that, okay, with Naruto, you say Harry Potter but ninjas. But then if they're still interested, then you have one sentence and then a paragraph explaining what the story is about. And each time you're giving out, more detail. So if the person is interested in what you're selling, you're going to keep asking and asking. And then you can just keep peeling away rather than trying to tell somebody your story and trying to dump a load of information onto them where they'll get confused, and you might get confused because you don't have it structured in this way, where maybe you've not even thought about it during that so-called just start phase, where you don't even fully understand what your story is about. You just have some vague idea. You want to be able to think about it and be able to justify everything and know all the necessary key things you need to at that point, especially if you want to get feedback from people, which is another step. Again, I'll go into more detail about getting feedback, but you need to think about it thoroughly. And I think having this format where you have a pitch, if they're interested in that pitch, okay, you have their attention. I write an Illustrator series called Apple Black. If I was going to give a mashup pitch, I would say that Apple Black is The Gray Man meets Harry Potter. If they wanted to know more, or let's say they didn't know what I was actually mashing up and putting together was, but they still wanted to know more for whatever reason, then I can go into, say, a 1-paragraph description of what the plot is about, and that'll look a little something like this. And then if they're more interested in, then I'll go into more detail and give them maybe multiple paragraphs about Apple Black, and that'll look something like this. And if they're still interested, then I can, go into, say, the world and the world building, or the character descriptions, and la 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 la, and maybe the first arc, and blah 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 blah. Depending on how much information I want to divulge, but you get the point. And I'll have videos that go into detail about how to, write a plot summary or description of your story, or character descriptions, or these mashup pitches and things like that, and to design them in such a way you capture your audience's attention and you keep them interested, and you still sprinkle little things here and there that illustrate how original and interesting whatever you're selling is. Another thing I forgot to mention is the actual title of your story, and having like some kind of branding, or having like a good logo that helps sell it as well. And I think I have a logo video, but I can go into more detail in a later date, going into more detail about having a good name, because that goes a long way as well. I'm not perfect at all these things, but I can talk about how and why these things are so important, so that people who are creating their own work don't brush over them. Before we move on to a following step, just keep in mind again that you want to give yourself some kind of restriction. So with the pitch, again, you're just mashing up 2 things, only 2, not 3, not 4, 2, right? Unless your restriction is 3, but usually it's 2. And then the next one would be, again, 1 paragraph. So you keep the description of your whole story to 1 paragraph. And sometimes that can be a challenge, but it's usually the best way. You can find the description for very complicated movies done in 1 paragraph as well. So if they can do it, you can do it. And then the next step, then, okay, you can give yourself a little more room, and instead of 1 paragraph, you have like maybe 3 or 5, or whatever the case may be. And then you just keep building. But you want to give yourselves those that restriction, so that you're not just pouring a bunch of information to the people you want to get information and feedback from and criticism from, because you don't want them to be confused and not give you accurate input. And it's usually best to do all these things if you know the story and all the milestones you want to hit, like everything you want to do, like the back of your hand, the characters, where you're going, all that kind of stuff. Or at least maybe not have everything set in stone like I suggested, but you have a good idea of the direction you want to take the characters in. Like, you need to know a lot, and it will help you when you're creating all this stuff, whether it be formally and to have it structured, or just jotting it down in your sketchbook. It helps you know your world better, and if you know what your world, then it's easier for you to explain it to others. Once you've done all of this, and I've been talking a lot, once you've done all of this, it's time to get feedback. And this is the critical part. This is the really important part that truly answers your question of, when are you good enough to start? When is your art or your writing or whatever the case may be, when is it ready for production or to show people or for the public? And let's call this the critique test cycle. So this is where you review everything you've done. And again, you be honest with yourself. Compare it to your favorite series or whatever out there. And if it does not hold up, at least close to or being on par or better in your head, you being honest with yourself, then maybe you're not ready for production yet. But it doesn't mean you haven't begun. It doesn't mean you haven't started the process. You just need to keep on practicing and developing your story and practicing your art and your writing and your techniques and all that to get it to that point. And once it passes that point, once it passes that honest test that you're giving yourself in your head, then it's ready to go. Now, sometimes, regardless of whether you're honest with yourself or not, maybe your judgment is not the best. So in order to help judge that test, right, where you're critiquing everything you have, you may need to solicit help from others. And those others need to have a lot of credibility, or enough credibility, to help you and tell you whether you're ready to go forward or to revise. And then, unless all your family members are, Oscar writers, winners, or people that are in the industry that you're trying to get into, they are probably not the best judges. Just because your mom said it looks like a duck, don't mean a duck. Bottom line, the goal is to find a way to get people you deem credible, or people the public deems credible, or the audience you're trying to get. Who does that audience see as credible, or things like that, right? Credible sources to review your work and tell you what they think, right? And maybe don't get just one source, get multiple credible sources as best as you can. It's not always easy to come by, but do your best. And from that feedback, it should help you, as long as you're taking an honest perspective on it. It should help you decide on whether you're ready to move forward or to revise. Again, even though they're credible, doesn't mean they're right. There are a lot of people who, their stubbornness and them being honest with themselves, they think their stuff is like the greatest thing ever. And, a professional might come out and say maybe it's not. It doesn't mean the professional is always right, but it's at least good to know what several professionals think. And then once everything is reviewed, the art, the story, the direction, the style, the decisions you're going to make when it comes to formatting, reading orientation, all of that, right? Once you've done that whole pitch thing, they've listened to your elevator pitch or your mashup pitch, and then they've listened to the plot in like one paragraph and then multiple paragraphs. At that point, maybe they've heard or you've read out some character descriptions for them, and they have a good grasp on what you're selling. At that point, once they've gone through all of that and they give you their feedback, you'd be in a good position to decide whether your art is good enough or your writing is good enough. And sometimes if they give you praises, that means it's good. If they don't and they tell you to go back, then, that's something to think about. So you're getting honest feedback from others, but you also have to get honest feedback from yourself. Do you think your work is on par or close to, or maybe in some cases even better than the works you admire? If the answer is yes, then that's a good sign. Now, to me, a pass doesn't mean that everybody needs to like it 100%. It doesn't always have to be 100% pass. It depends. Again, it goes back to what your goals are. In some cases, maybe a 70% pass, whatever that means to you, is enough, right? So if most people, from the feedback you've gotten like a 70% yes to go forward, to me, that's a good sign to go forward, right? If, depending on what your goals are, that's a good sign to go forward. But also keep in mind that you want to keep improving as you are creating your content. Starting at 70% means that there's room for growth, and you just want to make sure that each time you're creating content and creating work and writing and doing art, you want to make sure that you're getting better and better and better. Whether it be comparing yourself to the works that you admire or comparing yourself to the past work that you've created. And to me, that might be a little more important because it shows that you are going in the right direction. If you're getting better, if it shows growth, if you can look at the work you created this year versus last year and you can see instant growth, it shows that you're going in the right direction versus comparing yourself to others. But doing that has its perks, but it's a completely different thing that I can get to maybe in a different video. And then once you pass this, then you've answered your question. You're good enough. You're ready to go. If you fail, you go back to the previous preparation phase and you just keep working at it and developing it, and then you do the test again until you pass. Keep in mind this critique test cycle thing phase, that let's just call it that, is something you revisit and you do for maybe even every step moving forward from here, because what happens next, right? Once you've done all that, concept talking and stuff like that, now you're going into like an execution phase. And so what do? You create your script, whether it be for like a one shot or like a pilot chapter or a chapter 1, whatever it is you're creating. Again, this goes back to you answering all the questions you have for yourself in the beginning and being honest with yourself. So assuming you're creating this one shot chapter, you write a script for that chapter, right? And first impressions matter a lot. So this is the first time people are seeing this content, the title, the logo, all that, the art style, all that stuff. Now we're just focusing on just the script. You write your script, right? And then you get feedback. And then you go through another test specifically for that script based off of all the work you've done prior. And then until that script passes, you go to the next phase of having finalized designs for your characters, locations, props, and all of that. You take those designs, they go through again that critique phase, right? Once you're done getting feedback, if it passes, then it goes to the next phase of storyboarding based off of the locations, the characters, and the script, right? Now you're storyboarding and deciding how these comic pages are going to look, how each page is going to look, and the decisions you're making as to, why this panel is this small, or why this panel is big. Storyboarding, all these things, these individual things are things I can talk about on videos on their own, but I just want to talk about the broad subject overall and why they're important, so that when I make a video about them individually, it makes sense. But the storyboard will have to go through some kind of review and edit, and until it passes, and again, it's just review, right? If it doesn't pass, you have to then take it back and make some changes, right? And that review, again, you could be getting help from credible sources, people in the industry, someone like a professional. Let's say if I had access to the editor-in-chief of a major comic publishing company, he would be a credible source, or she would be a credible source that I could solicit and get help from. You know what I mean? So that's the caliber I mean. Sometimes you don't always have access to that. So in some cases, even if it's just an online artist that's really, really good and you admire, if you have access to them in any way, you can get help from them. Or you can get help from people who just consider themselves, I don't know, comic manga connoisseurs, and they could give you thoughts. And once in a while you have a lot of people that, even though they don't have that professional backing, they do have great minds for the stuff, and they could give you good advice. But you have to be smart and honest to know when you're getting good criticism from a good source and when you're not, right? And you have to not always lose. Again, once you know how you can justify all the decisions you're making, you might get some pushback from some of these sources, and if you can explain it, maybe you can change their minds. If you can't, then that's fine. The decision at the end of the day boils down to you. So you review, you edit based off of that review, and then you go forward. So like I said, script, character designs, or the world design, location, prop, the storyboards will go through review as well. Then once you're done with the storyboards, then you actually start working on the pages, the pencils, go through some kind of review, and then the inks, those go through some kind of review, and then the lettering, those will go through some kind of review, especially for grammatical stuff. So you want to get editors to go through that to make sure everything is on point. And if you can't get that, sometimes you want to train yourself to be able to get that. And again, there are a lot of online resources to help you do that. You don't always need an actual person to help you. Just you doing research and taking advantage of this digital age and the internet goes a long way. Because even me creating Apple Black and what I created, what I've done so far, a lot of it, especially in the beginning stage, I didn't have people that I could just call and just get help from. But I did have the internet, and I did get a lot of help from there, and YouTube videos, and I learned a lot of stuff myself. I had to learn it myself. So you need to have that entrepreneurship, go-getter attitude to learn these things if you don't have access to actual people. And then boom, you have your comic. But to answer that question, you need to do all the things I said, and then you need to go through some kind of critique from credible sources, and they can tell you whether you're ready or not based off of their experience of what they've seen that is maybe selling today, or the greatest comic today, whatever that may be to you. They can help you decide. And in some cases you don't need their help, but it's if you are so confused at that question, or you're very unsure, they can help nudge you in the right direction. So boom, you'll be done at that point. You've gotten reviews, so it'll even make you a whole lot more confident to get feedback from credible sources, and especially if they like it, it'll help you feel more confident in the direction you're taking your project. And after that, you've created your work, and you figure out how you're gonna get it to the people. Social media, how you gonna get attention for it? Do you want to sell it? Is it a hobby thing? You just want to keep for yourself? You just want to create it? You just want to create stuff? Whatever. Again, it goes back to that first step of you asking yourself those honest questions and being able to answer those questions. So you go through this phase of marketing, and then you just rinse and repeat, and you get better in time. Again, like I said, that passing the test is not 100. You don't need to get 100 on that test, whatever that means to you. But you need to, if you do pass, and to me it passes like a 70 maybe. And if you do pass, then you just want to make sure you're getting better and better and better and better. And from there on, you get more confident, and you'll know what you're doing. You will still need critique and from people and things like that, but you'd be more confident moving forward. You'd be confident enough to not ask yourself that question anymore. If you change a couple things here and there, the core principle can be applied to literally anything. Whether even if you don't make comics and you just write novels, same rules apply. And people don't go through these phases and do a lot of research and get feedback and all these kind of things. Sometimes they get it, maybe say once they've started your comic, and the comic maybe is not good, but like after a couple of chapters they realize that it's not good, and then it's too late. What are you going to do? And some people become so demoralized that they might just scrap the whole project overall, or then they want to reboot the project, and that's time, and there's just that sense of like, starting over. It's hard. Even though, sometimes you still have to do it, but it's hard. I'm telling you all this stuff because I've made all these mistakes, and I've had to redo stuff, or I've had to, say, scrap projects. And, luckily, there are some cases where I knew this might happen, and so I didn't do projects that I 100% liked, and I just did stuff to just test, right? So sometimes you might want to do a test story just to test it out, right? And test your skill and get the feedback that way before you actually work on projects you really want to work on. So I had a comic called Candlejack that I did years ago that some people still remember, funny enough, but it's riddled with so many issues that I'm glad I did it so I could get the mistakes out the way. So if you want to try that, you can do that as well. And even though I got a lot of mistakes out of the way, I still made mistakes when I was creating what I want to, like Apple Black, which is what I do now. I still made mistakes in the beginning, but I just made sure that I recognized those mistakes, those errors, and I course corrected as I grew forward. Which leads me into what I'm drawing. Right now, I'm actually drawing a page I'm putting back in Apple Black Chapter 1. Now, I know what you guys are thinking, Apple Black Volume 1 and 2 are already out, but I'm doing a remastered version. So this is like a second print run. Almost think of it like a second edition, where the whole book, Volume 1 especially, because Volume 2, again, I learned from my mistakes, so Volume 2 was much better than Volume 1. But Volume 1, because first impressions matter so much, I'm remastering Volume 1. And I'll have a lot of those pages actually, especially the pages that are already free online, I'll remaster and re-upload those where they are on Saturday AM website, and the links to everything you could possibly need will be in the description. But I'm remastering these pages, and in some cases the art is going to be improved, and in some cases like a page might be just thrown in there to make it feel and read better and all that kind of stuff. And I'm going to update all the volumes and then update all the pages that are available online. There'll also be other versions of these volumes, like the Perfect Tank version that we got funded through our Kickstarter for, but that's going to be it's going to be the same book, but it's going to have more content, and it's going to have more colored pages, and it's just going to be an overall better experience because of the Kickstarter. Thanks again to everybody who supported that. And so the page I'm working on it's the new canon page that's there, and we're just going to pretend like it was there the whole time for Chapter 1, and you guys will be able to access it in all of its glory, higher resolution and all that. Again, links will be in the description. You guys will also be able to go read Chapter 1 and all the chapters that follow and see all the changes and improvements that I made. Quick shout out to those who already have purchased Apple Black Volume 1. I wouldn't say you need to purchase, after these updates have been made, because the core story doesn't change. It doesn't change at all. You don't need to repurchase the whole thing. And the updated versions will eventually be all free on the site in time. And if you have an old version of the book and we meet in person, at least I'll be able to tell you're an OG Apple Black reader. And that's it I have on this subject, guys. I'd like to thank you guys for watching this video. I know it's pretty long, but so I'd like to thank everyone who's watched it, the whole thing, and made it to the end, the 1.5 people who've made it to the end of this video. Please don't forget the United States to smash the like button, subscribe button, and hit that bell so you stay notified each time I upload absolutely anything. Leave a comment if you have any questions, and to follow me on social media, Instagram, Twitter, all that good stuff. Links will be in the description below. Also, I'd like to let you guys know of the tournament that's going on currently where you guys can vote for your favorite fan art. I'll leave a link to where you can check that out. It's March Art Madness for 2019, which has been a great success so far this year. The winner gets an iPad, an Apple Pencil, and a bunch of other cool stuff as well. Shout out to this year's sponsors, Chameleon. And don't forget to check out Chameleon markers and their really cool blending features. Also, we're trying something new with the Saturday AM magazine where the latest issue is free for a limited time. Again, everything you possibly need will be in the description below. Subscribe to the magazine, read the latest issue, check out March Art Madness, check out Chameleon, check out the Saturday AM website, my social media, Saturday AM social media. We're about to hit 10K on Instagram, so you guys can help us pass that line. To my patrons who have supported me and helped this video happen: Arrow, Alan, Alec, Iosafu, Wear My Crown, Grish, Hack Wolfin, Jay, Tony, Pat O, and Ryan McFadden. The rest, big shout outs to you guys. Appreciate all the support. So I'm Manga, and I'm out. Oh man, this was a long video. My bad, y'all.